Read. That's basically it. Of course, you could also listen to podcasts or go onto YouTube and watch a million videos, but I think there's something special about reading, and it's more intense when you actually learn it. Like when you're reading it and reading from an expert mind, you also have the risk nowadays on YouTube that there's misinformation or it's written with ChatGPT or other AIs, and there's not the full 100% trust that it is an expertise. But if you read a book by a known author or by a known professional or a known investor, there's a high chance that that person knows what he's talking about and it's actual expertise and knowledge. This is at least what I did, and I intend to continue it that way. I read a lot, and it really helps me to make more sense of this entire investing and finance topic. And it's so complex and there's so many things to learn that it's just easier to have one book and then, not get distracted by all the other thumbnails and all the other, flashy podcasts or news websites and all this kind of stuff that can distract you. If you have a book in your hand, that's what you're going to read and focus on. So now that I've hopefully convinced you that you should read in order to get into investing and learn more about this topic, what book do you start with? I have a little list, and it goes from beginner to more advanced. Of course, these are just suggestions. This is just from what I read and how I got into this whole topic, and yeah, just my journey basically. And I want to share that because maybe it'll be good for you as well. So these are some of my favorites in each category. I have a whole okay, I gotta get this book first without destroying everything. Okay, here we go. So first one, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This one is probably the easiest entry point, and it doesn't matter how much you already know about finance or investing or economy or any of that stuff. It's more about personal finances and how you think about money in general. And that's exactly where you should start because it's an eye-opener in my opinion. It's more about like shifting your mindset about what money actually is and how you can multiply it and what are assets and what is debt and all those kind of like basic terms, really well explained in kind of like a story package. Robert Kiyosaki, teaches you financial literacy through simple stories. And he has this contrast between earning income and building assets. So essentially, it's about building wealth instead of just investing and making money now. It changes how beginners think about money, work, cash flow, and ownership. So the main takeaway here for you guys is the mindset. So yeah, this is literally what I started with. This is the first book I read on personal finance or anything investing related on my own spare time that was not connected to my college studies. Okay, so the second book is from Phil Town. It's Rule 1 Investing. I don't have it here. I don't know where it is. It has to be in some of my boxes that I took from, college. And then I can't find it right now, but I have the second book from Phil Town that I also read, and it's basically very similar principle. And yeah, that is Payback Time. So overall, Phil Town, I would say, is a value investor as far as I understand, and a long-time investor, very similar to Warren Buffett. And all the principles that he talks about are fairly simple. There's no crazy deep dive into any investing, formulas or anything like that. And it's really well written in a beginner's kind of tone. It tries to make this value investing feel practical instead of intimidating and overwhelming. Core lesson he talks about in these books is to buy great businesses at a discount, which is basically what Warren Buffett says. And by buying a business, he means buying a stock, so a part of a business. The main premise is about protecting yourself from permanent losses. It's this classic principle of long-term investing and margin of safety mindset that Benjamin Graham and Warren Buffett made famous. So for you guys, I think this is a phenomenal start. This book and Rule 1 Investing, the one I can't find, but these two books are really, really good to start if you want to go specifically into stock investing. All right, next up is the little book of common sense investing by Bogle. What's his name again? John C. Bogle. And I think this is probably the best book I would recommend you guys to read if you have a little bit of knowledge in investing already, or you think you can get through it with some, Googling on the side for some principles. But the whole concept of the book and why I think it's so good is that it focuses on one very specific concept of investing, which is investing in ETFs or in an index. If you don't know yet what that is, I highly recommend the book and also maybe Googling it. The key point about this book is that it is probably the laziest way to invest, and it's coincidentally also one of the most successful ways. You basically invest money every month, every year in the same index or ETF and then let it sit there. You don't do anything else. You don't need to know anything else. and eventually compounding will multiply your money and you'll be set for life. There are decades of experience with this kind of investing. So, you can look at the history, you can have the graphs from 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago and clearly see that it works. Like, it is proven. It's a proven strategy. It's not some, theory or concept out there in the world. You can see that it works and it's really not complicated. Highly recommend it. Whoops. Oh man, it's too many books. Second time it almost fell off my desk. Dando Investor. This is the first book in the intermediate range. I think the other 3 books are, very beginner friendly and you don't really need that much prior knowledge. This one, I think, is in the intersection. You don't really need that much prior knowledge, but it's not technical. Like, there are not too many calculations or formulas or anything like that, but it's more about investing as a theory, and it's more about risk and reward thinking. Like, it shifts your mindset a little bit. Why I think this could also go into the beginner category is because it's more centered around storytelling. So it tells you stories of, or real life examples of, successful people and how they made their investments, and what went well and how it went well, and the perspective and the mindset they had. So it's a very, very good read. It's not hard to get through because the stories are actually very captivating and interesting. Highly recommend. It's actually one of my favorite, to be honest, because it's so easy to read. It feels like a storybook or a drama book or something like that, with a lot of knowledge inside as well. It's overall just a great bridge from basic investing into real value investing logic. And the author, Pabrai, he focuses on asymmetric bets. So he has this famous idea of heads I win and tails I don't lose much if you flip a coin. And it just shows how to look for these high upside situations with limited downside. Value for you guys here is thinking in probabilities, simplicity, taking out all the noise and clutter, and then assessing risk and reward. And then also, really important in this book, it's a little bit controversial because a lot of financial professionals and also YouTubers, whatever, they will tell you something like diversification, right? They will tell you that it's very important to have all your eggs in different baskets, which just means that you have different kind of assets. So not just stocks. And if you have stocks, then not just stocks in tech, but also in health and some in, mining. Then not only stocks, but also have real estate and maybe some bonds. So different kind of assets. So you're safe if one fails, the other might still do well. Well, in Dando Investor, in this book, it's a bit controversial because he argues it's rather beneficial that you focus all your money or all your resources in one big bet that you are sure of. But the risk of losing is fairly low, and what you lose is fairly low, and the reward or the potential reward is gigantic, right? It's just like, it's a different mindset, so it can be a little bit dangerous. That's also why I'm not putting this in the beginner category, because I think it's better to read the standard advice first, and then you can read this and assess what you like more. Maybe try it out a little bit with low stakes. You don't have to invest, 100,000 immediately. You can start with 100 just to see what it feels like. All right, this one, the most important things illuminated by Howard Marks. Don't fully remember everything. I remember that I really, really liked it. You can see I also still have these, like, all these markers, but it's been a while. This is like 5 or 6 years ago that I read this. Overall, I know that Howard Marks, I have read his investor letters that he has, I think quarterly or monthly, I don't fully remember. But I do remember that it is very similar to, for example, Warren Buffett or Phil Town and other investors, where it's more about the mindset. And it's for investors that care more about judgment and strategy instead of just formulas. Marks focuses on risk, market cycles, second level thinking, and the psychological mistakes that destroy returns. So like I said, it's more about your mindset. It's more about being a disciplined investor, how you think about money, how you think about investments, how you think about individual stocks, not just get lost in the biggest returns and in the biggest profits. If I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the biggest takeaway from this book is that investing or success in investing mainly comes from discipline and risk control instead of picking the right stock at the right time. All right, now we come to probably my favorite author when it comes to investing books, and one of my favorite investors, Jim Rogers. Like, these 3 books, and I have some other books as well from him. I think I have almost every single book he ever published. I'm not entirely sure, but I have a lot. And out of these 3 books, so it's Investment Biker, it's Hot Commodities, and it is Street Smarts. All 3 books are so well written. And what I like about them the most is, especially in Investment Biker, it's a mesh, it's a blend of not just investing. He includes history, geography, philosophy, macroeconomics, geopolitical events, and theories. And it's just so fun to read because it's almost always with real life examples. For example, in Investment Biker, I just keep mentioning this book, but it is really good. I really enjoy it. I highly recommend it. It is for intermediates. Some of these concepts, if you've never heard or done anything in economics or investing, it might be a little bit boring or stale or confusing or overwhelming. So yeah, keep that in mind. But it's still so interesting because what he does in this book is he explains concepts and his way of thinking about investing while he was touring the world on his motorcycle. So he drives through a country, and then in that country, there's maybe an economic shift or they have currency problems. And then he explains that problem and that economic principle with the example of that country. And that's what makes it so interesting and appealing, because it's so easy to understand and grasp, because he takes such a complicated topic and just makes it more realistic. In all of these books, he just teaches you to think more globally. Think about everything that is connected, because that's essentially what investing is. There are so many companies in different niches and industries, and politics in one country that has nothing to do with the stock you're buying might essentially affect the logistics, or the new laws might affect the currency that company is using. So everything is connected, and that's what he always writes about, and that's what is so fascinating, to really realize how all these things work together. It's not just about individual stocks or formulas, or not just even one or two concepts. It's everything. And I read these books multiple times. I read these multiple times because every single time I feel like I learn something new, and it gets me away from this, oh my God, investing is just spreadsheets and formulas. No, it's not. It's strategies and all these other interconnected topics. Highly recommend it. They were so fun to read, and I will probably read them again next year. All right, now we're coming to the advanced books. Let's start with a bit different one. So this is Edward Thorp's A Man for All Markets. Not necessarily an investment book. This is more about gambling, which is very close to investing. And a lot of people might actually think that investing in stocks is kind of like gambling. What is the big difference between poker or lottery, or whether a stock goes up or down? And there is some truth to that. And this book is like a really nice intersection, because he's probably the master and expert when it comes to gambling. The cool thing about this book, and why I think it's relevant for investing, is it teaches you about, probabilities, chances, risk and reward, how you calculate that, and how it translates to your investments. And it's a good read. It's not too technical, even though it can get quite complicated. But why I think it's such a nice read is it's part memoir, like an autobiography. He talks about his past and, how he discovered things and what he did and where he went and how everything went. It's part masterclass in probability, edge, and rational risk and reward decision making. In this book, he shows in a detailed way how he mathematically and statistically actually beat casinos and was the guy. That's the guy. And therefore, also with his observations and his theories and his application, eventually started to influence modern finance. And not just influence, actually shape modern finance and investing. It's crazy. So I think the key takeaway and lesson from this book or learning would be proper risk assessment and risk management. This is a cringe name and a really bad cover. Stock Market Genius, How You Can Be a Stock Market Genius. This sounds a little bit like a title or a book written by AI, but I promise you this is one of the best and detailed investment books I've ever read. Why I think it's an advanced category is because some of these concepts are crazy detailed and complex. It can get overwhelming fast. The way he writes it is super nice. Small stories of real life examples and real life companies or management and how they invested. But there's so many concepts in this little book cramped together that if you don't already have prior knowledge, you will be overwhelmed. It's too much for someone who doesn't have a rudimentary understanding of investing, I would say. But if you do have that and you want to get into more detail and actually, have this intersection between good storytelling but also quite technical, really good book. And why I say it's like a little bit technical or a little bit confusing, it's not just about stock picking, but then it goes deeper into like spin-offs, mergers and acquisitions. It really goes deeper into what kind of investment tools you can use. And then we have the Investment Bible. So this is probably the most, known and famous book when it comes to investing. So Benjamin Graham was the mentor of Warren Buffett, if I remember correctly. The whole concept is just long-term value investing, the same thing Warren Buffett does. And if you subscribe to this kind of theory and to this way of investing, this will be your Bible. This book has everything. It has super technical formulas and calculations, graphs, statistics, but it also goes through basic concepts like what a moat is, and overall your mindset to investing and picking stocks. I think you can read this or start to read this if you're a beginner, but if you have zero knowledge about like finance, accounting, any of that stuff, any of that topic, it might be a little bit difficult and take you forever to read. I would suggest read other shorter books, basic books. This one I think is truly for people that are heavily invested, no pun intended, really want to dig deep and go into the weeds of investing. And they say, yep, Warren Buffett is my prophet, whatever you want to call it, and you really subscribe to his way of thinking about investing, then you want to read this. All right, these were my favorite investment books that I have read over the past years and, occasionally come back to or reference. And this is what got me into investing. This is what hooked me. This is what I really enjoyed and learned the most from. But we're not done yet. We have 4 more bonus books. These have nothing necessarily to do with investing, but like I said earlier, why I enjoyed, for example, Jim Rogers' books so much is that he realizes the connection in the world between investing and so many other topics. And among my favorite books that I recently read was The Four by Scott Galloway. It just gives you an introduction into 4 of the biggest and most successful companies in our time and maybe ever. So Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Apple. Yeah, he just writes in a really funny, clever, witty way, and it's packed with information. So you learn so much about how these companies function, how they work, why they work, the psychology behind it, why we buy those products, and how they are so successful. And that could help you understand other businesses as well. And I think since picking a stock is everything about picking a business, books like these are really important. Same with if you read autobiographies, startup books, you learn what goes into building a business and what good management, entails, stuff like that. So I think it's really important to learn these things as well. And this is a really good book. Then there is also first of all, let's start with Ryan Holiday. There's 2 books. I have more of his books, but these are probably the most important ones for me personally. Number 1, Ego is the Enemy. And then number 2, Discipline is Destiny. I've always had trouble with discipline. I'm only getting better at it now that I'm in my mid-30s. And ego, similar, was always a little bit of an issue for me personally. But both of these books, and in general, self-improvement books, and that's what I'm trying to get at, will help you become a better investor. Because, for example, Warren Buffett, Benjamin Graham, some of these authors that I just mentioned, and some of these books, they talk more about the mindset of investing than actually, calculating the investments. It's more about being aware of how to invest and what to expect than the actual investment itself, right? So a lot of preparation and a lot of success in investing comes from your mindset and how you are as a person. Are you disciplined enough to wait for the optimal or for the right time to invest? And by right, I don't mean timing the market. I mean, you are aware that the company is doing well and you think it's a company that you like to invest in. You understand the product, you understand what they're doing. But because of some macroeconomic event, the price is right now low. And that's when you buy. Do you have the discipline to wait until that point? Do you have the discipline to wait a year to do your research and find the one stock that you want to buy, or the 2-3 stocks? And then most importantly, do you have the discipline and the lack of ego to not instantly cash out or to get too greedy? These are all things, self-improvement, knowing yourself, being able to have a positive outlook on investing is super important and crucial. So books that I highly recommend, but in general, I mean, it doesn't have to be these. It can be anything in self-improvement or anything about that kind of stuff. All right, that was my list of books that I recommend reading. Those are the books that helped me get into investing, and I hope I could help you out and maybe inspire you to get started as well. I think reading is truly the best way to get into this topic and not be too intimidated too fast.